The marble floors of the Grayson mansion were cold enough to ache through skin and settle deep into bone. Eleanor Hayes pressed her worn palms against that unforgiving surface, her knees grinding into the hard tile as she scrubbed behind the bathroom toilet. At 68 years old, her body had become a map of quiet suffering joints that screamed with every movement, a spine that curved under invisible weight, hands that trembled no matter how hard she willed them steady, strapped to her back. Her twin grandchildren squirmed and fussed, their small bodies adding pressure to vertebrae that felt ready to crumble. Little Marcus and baby Rose, only 14 months old, had no idea their grandmother's shoulders burned like fire beneath those makeshift straps. Eleanor paused, pressing her forehead against her arm, trying to catch a breath that wouldn't come easily. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, so soft even the walls couldn't hear. The sharp scent of bleach filled her nostrils, mixing with the salt of sweat that rolled down her temples. She had been cleaning since 5 in the morning. It was now past 3 in the afternoon. Her lunch had been a glass of water and a slice of bread eaten standing up in the pantry, hidden like some shameful secret. This was not the life Eleanor had imagined when her son, Marcus Grayson Jr., had begged her to move into his beautiful home. "Mama, you raised me alone," he had said, his eyes shining with the same earnest love she remembered from his childhood. "Let me take care of you now. You deserve rest. You deserve peace." Rest, peace. The words felt like distant memories now. "Eleanor." The voice came from the doorway, cold as January wind. Victoria Grayson stood with her arms crossed, her designer blouse unwrinkled, her honey blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. She was beautiful in the way ice sculptures are beautiful, stunning to look at, impossible to touch without getting burned. "You missed a spot by the tub," Victoria said, a French manicured nail pointing toward an invisible speck. "And the babies are fussing again. Can you not keep them quiet while you work?" Eleanor lowered her head, shame flooding her cheeks with heat. "Yes, ma'am. I'll see to it. See that you do." Victoria's heels clicked against the marble as she turned. "If you want to stay in this house, Eleanor, you need to prove your worth. We're not running a charity." The words cut deeper than any blade. Eleanor had given everything to raise Marcus Jr. She had worked 3 jobs cleaning houses during the day, washing dishes at a diner in the evenings, and taking in laundry on weekends. She had gone hungry so he could eat. She had worn the same 3 dresses for years so he could have school supplies and decent shoes. She had poured every ounce of her love into that boy, watching him grow from a bright-eyed child into a brilliant businessman who now sat atop a technology empire worth hundreds of millions. And now, in the twilight of her life, she was on her knees scrubbing floors in his home while his wife watched with contempt. But Eleanor never said a word. Not to Marcus. Not to anyone. Because she remembered what it felt like to struggle alone, to wonder where the next meal would come from, to cry into a pillow at night while praying for better days. She never wanted her son to feel that heaviness again. His happiness was everything to her, even if it meant swallowing her own pain like bitter medicine. She thought of him now, probably in some glass-walled office downtown, making deals that would shape industries. He worked so hard. He provided so much. How could she burden him with her troubles when he had already given her a roof and a bed? No, she would endure. She always had. Eleanor dipped her sponge back into the bucket and continued scrubbing, her reflection wavering in the wet tile, a ghost of the strong woman she used to be. Outside the window, the Georgia sun blazed golden over the manicured gardens, oblivious to the quiet tragedy unfolding in the bathroom of a mansion that should have been her sanctuary. But somewhere in the universe, something was shifting. Because today, for reasons no one could explain, Marcus Grayson Jr. would leave his office 3 hours early, and everything he believed about his perfect life was about to shatter. Marcus Grayson Jr. loosened his tie as his Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway. The meeting had ended early, a rare gift in his world of endless negotiations and million-dollar decisions. For once, he thought he might surprise Victoria with an afternoon together. Maybe even play with the twins before dinner. He smiled at the thought as he stepped out of the car, the Georgia heat wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. The mansion stood before him, all white columns and gleaming windows, a monument to everything he had built from nothing. But as his hand touched the front door, something felt wrong. He couldn't name it. Just a whisper in his chest, a tightness that had no logical explanation. Marcus stepped inside, expecting the usual sounds: Victoria's music playing softly, the housekeeper's vacuum humming somewhere in the distance. Instead, he heard crying. Thin, tired crying, like babies who had been fussing for too long without comfort. He followed the sound up the grand staircase, his footsteps quickening with each step. The master bathroom door was open. What he saw stopped him cold. His mother, his 68-year-old mother, was on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor behind the toilet. Her gray hair had come loose from its bun, sticking to her damp forehead. Her shoulders shook with exertion, and strapped to her back, the twins wriggled and cried, their faces red with distress. "Mama?" His voice cracked. Eleanor's head snapped up, her eyes wide with something he had never seen before. Fear, shame, a desperate plea for him to look away. "Marcus." "Baby, She tried to rise, but her knees buckled beneath her. He rushed forward, catching her before she fell, horrified by how light she felt in his arms. How fragile, how broken. "Mama, what are you doing? Why are you—" She offered to help. Victoria's voice came from behind him, smooth as silk and twice as slippery. Marcus turned slowly, still holding his mother, and saw his wife standing in the doorway. Her arms were crossed, her expression calm, as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "She insisted, actually," Victoria continued, examining her nails. "You know how she is, always wanting to feel useful. I tried to stop her, but you know Eleanor. Stubborn as a mule." Something shifted behind Marcus's eyes. He looked at his mother, really looked, for the first time in months. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled even when she wasn't moving, the bruises on her forearms from carrying the twins' heavy car seats, the way her spine curved as if bearing an invisible weight. "Mama," his voice dropped to a whisper. "Did you want to do this?" Eleanor's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes darted to Victoria, then back to her son, filled with a lifetime of love and sacrifice and silence. "I didn't want to be a burden," she finally breathed. "You work so hard, baby. You've given me so much. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to." Her voice broke, and something in Marcus's chest shattered with it. He remembered now. The nights he came home late and found his mother sitting alone on the couch, her face empty, her legs swollen. The morning she said she wasn't hungry, even though her coffee sat untouched. The way she always deflected his questions with, "I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about your mama." He had believed her, because believing her was easier than looking deeper. Because his wife always assured him everything was fine. Because the money was flowing and the house was beautiful, and surely that meant everyone was happy. But now, standing in this cold bathroom that reeked of bleach and broken promises, Marcus saw the truth he had been too blind to recognize. His mother wasn't living in his home. She was surviving it. Victoria stepped forward, her voice honeyed with false concern. "Marcus, darling, she's exaggerating. You know how older people get. They forget things. They imagine things. If she was unhappy, wouldn't she have told you?" Marcus looked at his wife, really looked, for perhaps the first time since they married. He saw the tightness around her eyes, the way her jaw clenched when she glanced at his mother, the hollow warmth of a smile that never quite reached her soul. "Get out," he said quietly. Victoria blinked. "Excuse me?" "Leave this room, now." She opened her mouth to argue, but something in his expression silenced her. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking a sharp retreat down the hallway. Marcus knelt beside his mother, gently removing the straps that held the twins to her back. The babies quieted as he lifted them into his arms, their small hands reaching for their grandmother, whom they loved despite everything. "Mama," he whispered, his voice thick with tears he refused to let fall. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't see." Eleanor reached up and touched his face with a trembling hand. "You're here now," she said softly. "That's all that matters." But they both knew that wasn't true, because the damage had been done. Day after day, month after month, in the shadows of a mansion that should have been filled with love. And somewhere down the hallway, Victoria Grayson was already calculating her next move. The guest room had become Eleanor's refuge. It wasn't much a simple bed with crisp white sheets, a wooden dresser, and a window that overlooked the garden she was no longer allowed to walk through without permission. Victoria said the landscapers didn't want footprints in the mulch. Another lie. Another small cruelty disguised as reason. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed now, her palms pressed against the faded fabric of her house dress, trying to quiet the trembling that still rippled through her body. The twins had finally settled in their nursery, and the house had fallen into that heavy silence she had come to dread. Outside her door, she could hear Marcus pacing. His footsteps fell heavy and uneven, the steps of a man whose foundation had just cracked beneath him. "Mama," his voice came through the door, soft but urgent. "Can I come in?" She wiped her eyes quickly, smoothing her dress, trying to rebuild the mask she had worn for so long. "Of course, baby." The door opened, and her son stepped inside. He looked different, somehow older, more worn, as if the last hour had aged him a decade. He carried a glass of water and a small plate with crackers, setting them gently on her knitstand. "When did you last eat?" he asked quietly. Eleanor hesitated. "This morning, I think." His jaw tightened, but he didn't explode. Instead, he sat beside her on the bed, close enough to feel her warmth, but careful not to crowd her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "How long, Mama?" His voice cracked. "How long has this been going on?" Eleanor's heart seized. She had spent months protecting him from this conversation, building walls of silence brick by brick, convincing herself that ignorance would keep his marriage intact. But looking at his face, now the raw pain in his eyes, the way his hands gripped his knees like he was trying to hold himself. Together, she realized her silence hadn't protected him at all. It had only delayed the inevitable. "Since the beginning," she whispered. "Since I moved in," Marcus made a sound like he'd been punched. "She started with small things," Eleanor continued, the words pouring out now like water through a cracked dam. "Asking me to wash a few dishes, fold some laundry. I didn't mind at first. I wanted to help. Truly I did." She paused, her fingers twisting the fabric of her dress. But then it grew. The dishes became all the cooking. The laundry became cleaning the entire house. Then she gave me the babies to watch while she went to her spa appointments, her lunches, her shopping trips. And if anything wasn't done perfectly, her voice trailed off. "What?" Marcus pressed gently. "What would she do?" Eleanor met his eyes, and the shame in her gaze nearly broke him. "She would remind me how lucky I was to have a roof over my head, how your business was struggling, even though I know it's not, and how every meal I ate was coming out of your pocket. She said if I couldn't make myself useful, maybe I should find somewhere else to live." Marcus's face went pale. "Mama, I would never." "I know. Baby. Eleanor reached for his hand, her grip weak but steady. I know you didn't know. That's why I never told you. I could see how much you loved her, how hard you worked to build this life. How could I take that from you? Tears slipped down her weathered cheeks. I thought if I just stayed quiet, if I just endured, eventually things would get better. She would see that I wasn't a burden. She would accept me. A sad smile crossed her face. Foolish old woman dreams. Marcus pulled his mother into his arms, holding her like he used to hold her when he was a boy after nightmares, after bullies at school, after his father walked out and never came back. You're not foolish, he said fiercely. You're the strongest person I've ever known. And you should never have had to carry this alone. They stayed like that for a long time, mother and son. Two people bound by blood and love and years of sacrifice, finally reconnecting after too long in the dark. When Marcus finally pulled back, his eyes held a new determination. Things are going to change. Mama, starting tonight. Eleanor shook her head weakly. Marcus, please. I don't want to cause trouble in your marriage. The twins need their mother. You need what I need, he said firmly, is to stop being blind. What I need is to protect the people who matter most. And that starts with you. He stood, straightening his shirt, squaring his shoulders like a man preparing for battle. Rest now, Mama. I'll bring you dinner myself. And tomorrow? He paused at the door, his voice hardening to steel. Tomorrow, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation in this house. Eleanor watched him go, her heart heavy with fear and fragile hope. She had spent a lifetime loving her son from a distance, giving everything so he could have more. And now, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he would finally love her close, enough to save her. The dining room had never felt so cold. Marcus sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his plate untouched, his eyes fixed on Victoria with an intensity that made the air feel thin. The chandelier above them cast harsh light on everything, the pristine china, the fresh flowers, the carefully curated perfection of a home that was rotting from the inside. Victoria cut her salmon with surgical precision, pretending not to notice her husband's stare. She had spent the last 3 hours preparing for this moment, rehearsing her lines, arranging her expression into the perfect blend of concern and innocence. The fish is excellent tonight, she said casually. I'll have to compliment Rosa. Rosa quit 2 months ago, Marcus replied flatly. Because you berated her for using the wrong garnish on a Wednesday. Victoria's knife paused mid-cut. That's not. My mother made this dinner. His voice was quiet but sharp as broken glass. While you were at the spa, again. The mask flickered. Just for a moment. Then, Victoria set down her utensils with exaggerated calm. Marcus, darling, I understand you're upset. But this whole situation has been blown completely out of proportion. Your mother is elderly. She gets confused. She probably doesn't even remember offering to help with the housework. She remembers everything. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. What has she been telling you? The truth. Marcus pushed his chair back from the table. That you've been using her as unpaid labor for months. That you threatened to have her removed from the house if she didn't comply. That you made her strap our infant children to her 68-year-old back while she scrubbed floors. His voice rose with each word. Years of buried frustration finally breaking surface. Is that accurate, Victoria? Or did my mother imagine all of that too? For the first time since Marcus had known her, Victoria Grayson looked genuinely afraid. Her porcelain composure cracked, revealing something ugly beneath desperation, calculation, and a fury she could barely contain. She's manipulating you, Victoria hissed. Can't you see? She never wanted us to be happy. She's always looked at me like I wasn't good enough for her precious son. This is her revenge, turning you against your own wife. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. My mother has never asked me for anything. Not money. Not recognition. Not even my time. She spent her entire life giving to me, sacrificing for me, making sure I had every opportunity she never had. And this, he gestured around the opulent room. This empire exists because of her. He leaned forward, his eyes burning. Do you know what she did so I could go to college? She worked 18-hour days. She ate rice and beans for months so I could have books and clothes and a computer. She gave me everything, Victoria. Everything. And you reduced her to a servant in her own son's home. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. I made this house what it is, she spat. I planned every detail. I organized your social calendar. I made sure you were seen with the right people, wearing the right clothes, living the right life. Without me, you'd still be some nobody from the projects. The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus stared at his wife, the woman he had married 5 years ago, convinced she was his partner, his equal, his future. He remembered how charming she had been, how attentive, how she had laughed at all his jokes and looked at him like he was the center of her universe. He hadn't realized then that he was being auditioned, that every smile, every touch, every whispered promise was calculated to secure her place in his rising fortune. Is that what you think? He asked softly. That on a nobody? Victoria's face shifted, realizing she had gone too far. Marcus, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. He moved toward her slowly, and she retreated until her back pressed against the wall. You've always believed that. You just hit it better before. He stopped just inches from her, his voice dropping to a whisper. My mother raised me in a 2-room apartment with cockroaches in the walls and hope in her heart. She taught me that character matters more than money, that kindness costs nothing, that the measure of a person is how they treat the people who can do nothing for them. His eyes bore into hers. You failed that test, Victoria, spectacularly. She trembled, whether from rage or fear. He couldn't tell. What are you going to do? She demanded. Divorce me? Destroy your perfect image. Your board members, your investors, they'll have a field day. Marcus straightened, something settling in his expression like iron cooling into shape. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling my lawyers. Not for divorce proceedings, not yet, but to understand exactly what legal options exist when someone systematically abuses an elderly person in their care. Victoria's face went white. You wouldn't watch me. He turned and walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. Sleep in the east wing the night. And Victoria? He looked back over his shoulder. Stay away from my mother. The door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid. And in the empty dining room, surrounded by cold food and colder marble, Victoria Grayson finally understood that her carefully constructed life was beginning to crumble. Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay in the narrow guest bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a house at war with itself. Somewhere below, she heard raised voices, her son's deep baritone, Victoria's sharp soprano words she couldn't make out, but didn't need to. Her heart ached with a pain that had nothing to do with her tired body. She had never wanted this. Not the confrontation, not the fractures spreading through her son's marriage, not the weight of being the reason his world was falling apart. All she had ever wanted was to love him quietly, to exist in the margins of his happiness without demanding space at its center. And now everything was chaos. A soft knock came at her door. Mama? You awake? She sat up slowly, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. Come in, baby. Marcus entered carrying a tray chamomile tea, a small bowl of soup, and a cloth napkin folded into a swan. The same way she used to fold his napkins when he was little, trying to make their meager meals feel special. He remembered. You need to eat something, he said gently, setting the tray on her lap. And I figured you could use some company. Eleanor looked up at her son, this man who had grown from the skinny boy she used to walk to school, his hand clutched in hers, his eyes full of dreams. He had achieved everything she had ever hoped for him. More dot, but right now. Sitting on the edge of her bed, with worry etched into his face. He looked exactly like that little boy again. Marcus, she began, I don't want you to throw away your marriage because of me. Victoria is. She has her ways, but she's still the mother of your children. Those babies need to grow up seeing how women should be treated. Marcus interrupted firmly. They need to learn that love means respect. That family protects each other. He took her weathered hand in his. And they need to know their grandmother. Really know her. Not as a servant. Not as a burden. As the extraordinary woman she is. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I'm not extraordinary, she whispered. I'm just an old woman who didn't know when to speak up. You're wrong. Marcus's voice was thick with emotion. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever known. You taught me how to work hard, how to be kind, how to keep going when everything seems impossible. Every success I've had, every door that opened it, all started with you. He paused, composing himself. I'm sorry, Mama. I got so caught up in building the life I thought I wanted that I forgot to check on the people who actually matter. I let comfort make me blind. And you suffered because of it. Eleanor reached up and touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. You see me now, she said softly. That's what counts. They sat together in the quiet room, mother and son, the years of distance dissolving into something warm and familiar. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, but inside this small space, there was light. After a while, Marcus spoke again. I hired an attorney today, and I made some calls to the County Elder Services office. Eleanor stiffened. Marcus, I don't want to cause more trouble. This isn't about trouble, Mama. It's about truth. He squeezed her hand. The things Victoria did to you, they're not just wrong. They're illegal. Georgia has strong elder abuse laws. And I've been documenting everything. The nanny cam footage from the nursery. The text messages she sent you with her instructions. The medical records showing how much weight you've lost since moving in. Eleanor stared at him. You you knew. About the texts? Marcus's jaw tightened. I saw them on your phone last week when you left it charging in the kitchen. I didn't say anything then because I didn't want to believe it. But I took screenshots. Just in case. He met her eyes. I should have acted sooner. I'm sorry. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, something shifted in her expression, not quite hope, but the first fragile recognition that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to suffer in silence anymore. What happens now? She asked. Marcus leaned forward. Tomorrow, we start fighting back. Together. And this time, Mama, I'm not leaving your side. The tea grew cold on the tray, forgotten. But neither of them noticed. For the first time in months, Eleanor Hayes felt something she thought she had lost forever. Strength. The morning sun crept through the mansion's tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble foyer. Victoria descended the staircase in her silk robe, her hair perfectly arranged despite the sleepless night. She had spent hours calculating her next move, rehearsing conversations, preparing counterattacks. This was a battle she refused to lose. She found Marcus in his study, speaking quietly on the phone. When he saw her in the doorway, his expression hardened, and he ended the call. We need to talk, she said, closing the door behind her. Rationally, without your mother poisoning the conversation. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair. Go ahead. Victoria moved to the armchair across from him, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. I know things have been strained, and perhaps I've been too demanding of Eleanor. But you have to understand, Marcus, she inserted herself into our family. She changed our dynamic. I was simply trying to find a place for her that made sense. A place scrubbing toilets at 68 years old? She offered to help. Multiple times. Victoria's voice dripped with wounded innocence. I was trying to make her feel included. Useful. I thought it would be good for her mental health to have purpose. Marcus laughed, but it was cold. Purpose, right. I'm serious. She leaned forward, her eyes glistening with manufactured tears. I know I can be intense, but everything I do is for this family. For you, for the twins. Her voice cracked beautifully. I love you, Marcus. Doesn't that count for anything? For a moment, just a moment, Marcus felt the familiar pull. The charm that had captivated him 5 years ago. The vulnerability that had made him want to protect her. Victoria had always known exactly which strings to pull, but then he remembered. He remembered finding his mother on her knees, baby strapped to her breaking back, tears streaming down her face. He remembered the bruises on her arms, the weight she had lost, the light that had dimmed in her eyes. And he remembered the text messages on his mother's phone. If you can't pull your weight around here, Eleanor, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live. The floors better be spotless by the time I get home. Or we'll have a problem. Stop looking at me like that. You should be grateful you're not in a nursing home. The charm shattered like glass. I saw the messages, Victoria. Her face froze. The texts you sent my mother. The threats. The humiliation. I have screenshots of every single one. Victoria's composure cracked further. Those were taken out of context. There is no context that makes those words acceptable. Marcus stood slowly, his 6-foot frame casting shadow across her chair. And that's not all. I spoke with the landscaping company. They never asked my mother to stay off the garden paths. That was you. I spoke with Rosa before she left. She told me you fired her because you wanted my mother to do her job for free. Victoria's breathing quickened. I also pulled the footage from the nursery camera, Marcus continued, his voice deadly calm. The camera you thought I had disconnected. I saw everything, Victoria. The way you spoke to her. The way you watched her struggle without lifting a finger to help. The way you stood in that bathroom doorway while she collapsed from exhaustion. He leaned down until his face was inches from hers. The attorneys I spoke with yesterday used a specific term for what you've been doing. It's called elder abuse. And in the state of Georgia, it's a felony. The color drained from Victoria's face. You wouldn't. I already have. A sharp knock at the study door made them both freeze. Marcus straightened and called out, "Come in." The door opened to reveal Elena standing beside a man in a dark suit and a uniformed police officer. Victoria's eyes went wild with panic. "Mr. Marcus Grayson?" The suited man asked calmly. "Yes. I'm attorney David Monroe. This is Captain Williams from the county sheriff's office. We're here regarding the formal complaint filed yesterday." He opened a folder. "Against Victoria Grayson." Victoria shot to her feet. "This is insane. Marcus, tell them this is a misunderstanding." But Marcus didn't move. Captain Williams stepped forward. "Mrs. Grayson, we have documented evidence of systematic elder mistreatment, psychological coercion, and exploitation. You'll need to come with us for questioning." Victoria spun toward Marcus, her mask finally shattering completely. "You're destroying everything we built. Everything I sacrificed. Do you think you can raise those children without me? Do you think anyone will take you seriously after this?" Marcus met her eyes with perfect calm. "I think I'll finally be able to look at myself in the mirror." As the officers moved forward, Victoria screamed, "This isn't over, Marcus. You'll regret this. You need me." He shook his head slowly. I needed a partner who had a heart. What I got was a performance. The front door closed behind her with thunderous finality. And in the study, surrounded by silence and sunlight, Eleanor Hayes finally allowed herself to breathe. The county courthouse stood weathered but dignified against the Atlanta skyline, its stone columns a testament to the weight of truth sought within its walls. Eleanor walked up the steps with Marcus at her side, her new cane steady beneath her palm. She had gained back 3 pounds in the 2 weeks since Victoria's arrest. She was sleeping better. The tremor in her hands had quieted, though it never fully disappeared. But today, her nerves hummed with anxiety. Today, she would have to tell her story out loud, in front of lawyers and officials and strangers who would judge whether her suffering was real enough to matter. "You don't have to do this, Mama," Marcus said quietly as they reached the entrance. "The evidence speaks for itself. The attorney said your testimony isn't required for the protective order." Eleanor squeezed his arm. "I need to do this," she said softly. "Not for the court, for me. For every woman who's ever been told her pain wasn't worth speaking about." Marcus nodded, pride and pain warring in his eyes. "Then let's go." The hearing room was smaller than Eleanor expected. Just a long table, a few chairs, and a recorder capturing every word. Victoria sat at one end with her attorney, dressed in muted colors that attempted to project humility. But her eyes, when they met Eleanor's, held nothing but venom. The judge, a silver-haired black woman named Judge Patricia Collins, gestured for everyone to be seated. "This hearing concerns the petition for a protective order filed by Marcus Grayson Jr. on behalf of Eleanor Hayes against Victoria Grayson," Judge Collins began, her voice measured and firm. "Mrs. Hayes, you may give your statement." Eleanor rose slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. For a moment, she felt small. Small like the girl who grew up in rural Alabama, picking cotton alongside her grandmother. Small like the young mother who buried her own pride to give her son a better life. Small like the old woman who had scrubbed floors and swallowed tears in a mansion that was never her home. But then, she looked at her son, at the judge, at the recorder that would preserve her truth forever, and she began to speak. "My name is Eleanor Hayes," she said, her voice wavering but clear. "I am 68 years old. I raised my son alone, working 3 jobs, going without food so he could eat, wearing the same clothes for years so he could have an education." She paused, steadying herself. "When Marcus asked me to live with him, I thought it was a blessing, a chance to rest after a lifetime of struggle, to know my grandchildren, to be surrounded by family." Her eyes found Victoria's. "Instead, I became a servant in a house of strangers. I cooked, I cleaned, I cared for infant twins while my body broke down around me. I was told I was worthless if I couldn't work. I was threatened with homelessness if I complained. I was made to feel that my suffering was a small price for the privilege of having a roof." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "I stayed silent because I loved my son. Because I didn't want to be the reason his family fell apart. Because somewhere in my heart, I believed what she told me, that I was a burden. That I didn't deserve better." Her voice strengthened. "But I do deserve better. Every mother does. Every grandmother. Every woman who gives her whole life to her children and asks for nothing but love in return." She looked directly at Victoria. "What you did to me was wrong. And I'm not staying silent anymore." The room fell utterly still. Victoria's attorney whispered something in her ear, but Victoria's face had gone slack. The realization finally settling that her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her. Judge Collins reviewed the evidence folders before her, the text messages, the medical records, the video footage, the testimony from former staff. When she looked up, her expression was granite. "The evidence presented here establishes a clear pattern of elder abuse, coercion, and psychological manipulation, she said firmly. The protective orders granted immediately and indefinitely. Mrs. Victoria Grayson is prohibited from contacting Eleanor Hayes in any form. Additionally, this court recommends that the district attorney pursue criminal charges. Victoria's face crumpled. "Marcus," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please, I'm the mother of your children. You can't do this to me." Marcus stood slowly, his hand resting on his mother's shoulder. "You did this to yourself, Victoria. Every cruelty, every lie, every moment you chose power over compassion. You built this ending with your own hands." He helped Eleanor rise, guiding her toward the door. "My mother taught me that the measure of a person is how they treat the people who can't fight back," he said quietly. "You failed that test, and now you'll answer for it." The door closed behind them, leaving Victoria alone with the weight of everything she had destroyed. Outside, the Georgia sun wrapped warm around Eleanor's shoulders. For the first time in months, she lifted her face to the sky and smiled. 3 months later, the mansion felt different. It wasn't the fresh flowers on every table, or the new paintings Marcus had chosen to replace Victoria's cold modern art. It wasn't even the sound of the twins giggling as they crawled across the living room floor, their grandmother watching from the plush armchair that had become her favorite seat. It was the air itself. Lighter somehow, warmer, as if the house had exhaled a poison it had been holding for years. Eleanor walked through the garden, now, really walked, without fear of reprimand. The landscapers waved to her, called her Miss Eleanor, sometimes brought her lemonade when the afternoon heat grew thick. She had planted roses along the back fence, tending them each morning with hands that no longer trembled. Victoria's criminal trial was set for next month. She had accepted a plea deal: probation, community service, mandatory counseling. The judge had considered prison, but settled on something Victoria would find almost worse: public record of her crimes, visible to anyone who searched her name. Marcus had filed for divorce immediately after the hearing. It would be final within weeks. The twins, too young to understand, simply adapted the way children do. They reached for Eleanor when they woke from naps, toddled toward her when they learned to walk, babbled her name, Nana, before almost any other word. Eleanor treasured each moment like the gift it was. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, Marcus found his mother on the garden bench, watching the light fade. He sat beside her, silent for a moment, just breathing the same air. "You're different," he finally said. "Lighter, like something inside you finally unclenched." Eleanor smiled softly. "I spent so long carrying weight that wasn't mine to carry. Fear, shame, the belief that my worth depended on what I could do for others." She looked at her hands, weathered, lined with age, but steady now. "It took almost losing everything to realize I'm enough, just as I am." Marcus took her hand in his. "I'm sorry. It took so long for me to see what was happening. I was so focused on success, on building something impressive, that I forgot what actually matters." "You see it now," Eleanor said gently. "That's what counts." They sat together as the fireflies began their slow dance across the garden, tiny lights blinking in and out of darkness. "I've been thinking," Marcus said carefully, "about scaling back at work, about being home more, about raising those babies the way you raised me, with time, with presence, with love that doesn't require achievement." Eleanor's eyes glistened. "Marcus, you gave me everything, Mama. Now let me give something back. Not money, not houses, just time, together." She leaned her head against his shoulder, the way she used to when he was small, and she was his whole world. "That's all I ever wanted," she whispered. "Just to be close. Just to be seen." Inside the mansion, the twins slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams babies dream. The house stood quiet but alive, filled with the promise of healing and the stubborn, beautiful resilience of love. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the evening breeze against her skin. She had survived cruelty. She had found her voice. She had watched justice unfold not through revenge, but through truth, spoken with quiet courage. And now, finally, she was home. Sometimes the people who love us most suffer in silence, not because they are weak, but because they are too strong, too loving, too afraid of disrupting our happiness. And the tragedy is this: love without attention becomes invisible, and invisibility becomes pain. So look closer, listen deeper, ask the questions you've been avoiding, because the ones who never complain are often the ones who need us the most. If you were in Eleanor's place, would you have stayed silent or spoken up? And if you were Marcus, would you have seen the truth in time? Asterisk. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Unbroken Grace Stories community. Where are you watching from?